safety. It was a lot of educating clients and the community about abusive international marriages. Although we all knew it was wrong, we never really talked about it in a way to make it an issue, to point it out as an issue of being wrong. Everybody kind of just talked about it, and that was it. But helping our organizations and helping our community and the women that we were working with to be able to talk about abusive international marriage in a way that people can hear it, that it was an issue in our community and it wasn't a laughing matter. Safety planning started to look different for us. Safety planning involved all those other systems that she was navigating. Safety planning started to involve a lot more than just finding her a safe place to be or finding her a way out. It was a lot more planning, and it was consistent planning with victims and survivors. Sexual assault victim support. We started to have conversations about, okay, so there's an increase in sexual violence. How do we talk about, what terminology do we have to talk about it? And being comfortable to talk with clients about it, and being comfortable to give them the language so they can start talking about it with us. And then it was empowerment, empowering to support each other. And many times this was empowering the first wives to be that support for the second wife, or empowering the children to support the mothers, and empowering our community to stand up and stop talking about second wives as if they were a gift for a young flower, Hmong people say, that was being brought out to show. So empowering folks to really talk and stand up about that. So this, with this issue, we saw that it had to take more than just us as Hmong advocates and as Hmong women. And it was an issue that it had to involve more than just us, those of us in the United States. So we started looking at who else weren't we building with? Who did we have to start building with? And it was with everyone in all the other countries, Laos, Thailand, wherever these young brides are coming from, with men, with children, and with women. And it was a lot of leadership building, being able to bring everyone to the table and talk about it. Like we mentioned before, since everybody was impacted by this situation in a way or another, making it so that everyone could come and share their experiences, and really involving the whole community. And I think at this point also we stopped calling the women that were coming to us for help, our clients. We stopped calling them victims and survivors, and we started calling them sisters. So in Wisconsin, when we start saying sisters, we're not labeling anyone as victims or survivors. And it was important for us to have a network of advocates and people around the United States and in different countries that were doing the work. One example, we had a young lady who was brought here as a second wife from Laos, and when she got here and she ended up leaving her abusive relationship, she knew she could no longer stay in the state, or even in a city, or even the state, so she had to leave. But without having this network of advocates and knowing who's doing the work in a different state, we wouldn't have been able to connect her to someone else to support her and to make that transition for her to leave as easily. So some of the lessons learned, we learned that we had to create a new moral compass for our community because our old leadership had failed us and couldn't do anything for us anymore. We had to start building sisterhood, and sisterhood being both here and overseas, and really put those who are most impacted in the center. Increasing our leadership locally, nationally, and globally And this has resulted in 2 international gatherings, building women's leadership skills so that women who were natural leaders have the skills to even come to the table and have discussions. And shifting power and dismantling power. So really giving power back to powerful among women leaders and those who are most impacted to make decisions. So as women, we must connect to each other and not just have messages about women's statuses delivered by men, but for us to be communicating directly between women. And I believe that's it for my part.
Great, thanks, Ty. So this is Bo again, and I'm sorry we couldn't figure out how to make the media work, but we have 2 links to videos in there, and they were PSAs that we created specifically for to talk about the impact of abusive international marriages on children, because we were finding that the conversation became very gendered, and there was a lot of debate about, men versus women, and that's not the dynamics in which is going to facilitate change and action. So we did a PSA on children, and then we also know that change is not going to happen, or this issue is not going to go away unless men are part of the solution. So we also did a PSA with Hmong men to talk about that. So you can take a look at those PSAs when you have a chance. I also want to share that, Building Our Future is a community campaign, and we are not a nonprofit organization. We do find resources when we need to come together, but all the advocates, some work as in the field of domestic violence, sexual assault, or other like child support services and things like that. But many don't. We are just concerned community members who are really taking this on to engage our community and to really think about kind of the cultural change strategies that need to happen. So we don't have a physical space, but we are very active online because that is one of the ways in which we can engage with our brothers and sisters overseas to talk about this. It's allowed for us to connect. And we also have a Tumblr site where we actively post information. And then we just put out a brief that tries to explain some of what Gajwa talked about in terms of clarifying why we call this abusive international marriages. How does it differ from sex tourism and trafficking and things like that? So there's a link to that for you if you're interested. So that ends our presentation today, and we have roughly about 28 or 29 minutes left, so we'll take questions if you have any. And I think I haven't been paying attention to the chat box, so I don't know if there were questions that came in, Nancy. But also, I'll just stop there and see if there are questions.
There weren't any questions that came up, but I guess we can engage in conversation as folks, can begin typing their questions. Let's see. I was curious about the ways in which, for if if you have a message for advocates who may be in, for example, domestic violence organizations that work among communities, what would you want them to know, or what would you want them to keep in mind?
I'm sorry, Nancy. I started seeing questions. I looked at them and then I missed the first half of the question. Could you say it again?
I think,
sure.
Ty could probably answer that too.
Yeah, for advocates in domestic violence organizations working with Hmong communities, what would you want them to keep in mind as their, as a takeaway from this webinar?
Yeah. Ty, do you want to take that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
for advocates,
or what would you want DV advocates to know? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the most important thing that we've learned here at the was women were coming and they were telling us sound right, like things that we didn't see necessarily fit in as our or folks we would imagine, that we start asking deeper questions and about issues such as international marriages. So we started to understand how violence may look differently from what we're normally used to seeing. And the other say to domestic violence advocates is to remember that there has been a movement that even if you're a Hmong advocate, I think you're you know a lot of.
Shai, I think your audio is coming in and out a little bit. Can you maybe reposition and speak closer to the mic?
Yeah. So to really reach out to who have been doing the work for a while to help you better understand. Like I said, if you are a Hmong advocate or you programs or you think your program can serve the Abusive International Marriages is a community, and it helps to have work for a long time.
Ty, you're going in and out, Ty.
Sorry, guys. I think something's wrong with my phone.
Okay, maybe call. Okay. So we have a question here that talks about both about what happens to perpetrators or abusers, and then how can we get them to be on our side to combat abusive international marriages. If we don't engage them, they will just keep building their lines of victims. And then there's another question here that is kind of similar, so we can answer that. I'd like to hear more about your work. Do you have partner organizations in Thailand? So maybe, Bo, you take the international question, and then let me talk about engaging men in these conversations.
Sure.
And so one of the things, so I'll answer to what is being done directly with perpetrators or abusers and how can they get involved. So one of the things that we really focused on from the beginning was we recognize that these are, regardless if they're abusers or not, or perpetrators, that at the end of the day, they were still our brothers, our uncles, our family members. And so, yes, there is an accountability there, but the accountability has to be transformative. What that means is that it has to transform communities, that there are the majority of the women that we work with and victims and survivors on both sides, those who have come here, those who are overseas, and those of the first wives, incarceration and calling the police is not ideal for them. Even when they write to the embassy and they feel like they may get their spouse or their ex-partners in trouble, they frame it in a way that it doesn't criminalize anybody. And so I think that, like, it's not us that's doing that. It's just the women that we're working with. And we understand totally why, because we still have to be part of the community. These people have to still be part of the community. What we've done really well is that we've engaged, like, groups like Man Forward in Minnesota. They're actively helping us to, in one of the videos that you all will see, actively helping us to call this issue out. We are actively working with our brothers and sisters, brothers and uncles and the folks who are going back. we're telling them, like, you no longer can do this because we're not silent about that. This has been happening for 7 years. We made this commitment to our community to do that. And so I think that now, like, you're seeing more in the public media, but this is a long time coming. We've been organizing silently, and people don't know that, but I think that is a commitment that we've made. And yes, we are now telling our fathers, we are now telling our brothers. It's out there, and people know about us, and we also so I think that. And then the other thing is that we're also educating people overseas, and so Bo can talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe I'll just add to what Gajwa said, which is that the majority of Hmong men are not in this practice. This is a small handful, but the problem is that the men who don't do it are not vocal about what a good Hmong man is. And so when we work with groups like Men Forward, there's a lot of discussion about patriarchy and how that's harmful to men as well, because it keeps them in boxes. And so if they choose to do something that is different than that, there is consequences for them, right? Because people will, may say certain things. And so that is really important, which is, how can men who don't do this and think that this is wrong be more public and show up in solidarity? Because otherwise, so long as we keep being the people who are just the only ones saying it, then it becomes just a gendered issue, and it's not. It harms everybody, as we've shared. In terms of the global work, we connect with individuals, but also we work with organizations in Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam, and kind of that whole region, because we know that it is really important, and that girls over there have the same dreams that girls over here have. And so, for example, Gajwa, myself, and Kaying were very active in helping to support the founding of a Hmong Women's, the only ethnic organization in Laos that supports the educational and economic hopes and dreams of young, particularly Hmong girls in that country. And then in Thailand, and that's the organization called Sisterhood for Development. And then we also work with the Hmong Women's Network in Thailand and a social enterprise in Vietnam called Sapa. And so we realized that, there's many motives for why people do this on both sides, and that oftentimes we hear that this practice is being perpetuated by older Hmong men who have a lot of mental health issues, and so we often push back and say, if those are our community's issues, let's address them, but let's not excuse men from doing this in the community simply because we have a patriarchal kind of culture that people find challenging to bring up. And so we know that mental health and PTSD and, many people have those issues, but also we are seeing a trend of younger men who are, just in their 50s or 40s who are marrying younger brides. And so that very huge age range doesn't have to be underage. It could be, I got a call from the embassy from a young woman who's in her 20s, and her husband is in his late 50s, and that's a 20-year difference, and just their different statuses give him power, and they were in a very difficult situation, and she ended up back in Laos without knowing, understanding that that's what was going to happen. So I think that we have to also understand that this issue encompasses lots of issues, but the definition should help as well. So
the other question that is on top by Jennifer Lang is that, what types of root causes are related to the issue of abusive international marriages, specifically among men? So I think that patriarchy and the devaluing of women and girls, not only in the Hmong community, but throughout the world, right? Because if you see abusive international marriage, we termed it that, we labeled it that in the Hmong community. But when I was a exchange student in Thailand 20 years ago, what I was seeing was it wasn't Hmong men who were doing it. It was like white European and U.S. Folks, right? These older men in Southeast Asia with these really young girls. And so I think that this is something that's been happening for a long time. It just so happened that in our community it started happening also. And so I think that it's good, important for people to understand that it is not particular to Hmong communities, that it is that it happens because men, the Hmong women that we work with, they said it best. They said, it happens because Hmong men get to be bachelors for life. And I'm sure that basically is similar in many, many cultures also. The other thing is, of course, globalization, right? Access to these countries. And then capitalism. I mean, there's so many, and this is how it's showing up in our communities. Bo, did you want to add anything about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that just the value of our dollar, we bring $100 here and it's worth, 800,000 kip in Laos, right? And so, that makes a huge difference. And, one family's there work a hard day of labor and maybe get $5, right? So, those are the root causes that facilitate this happening is men's privilege, our privilege as a first world country where we can travel freely. Those are we often hear that, the excuse of, sometimes it's the young girls who cheat the men out of money, and we have to say, well, they are not the ones coming to this country, and all of those things, right? And also that in particular for our community where the transnational relationships are still very strong because we are, a community that still has many relationships over there because, those of us who got to come to this country still have many relatives over there. And so sometimes people see it as a way for them to be able to unite. And so, issues like immigration is very important to us. If we have backlogs of, 20 or plus years for families, then sometimes they see this as a way to give their daughter who might be distantly related to the much older spouse a way to come, and they say, well, it's a way to help a family member, but that should not be the option. So I do think that there are many root causes that are tied to the power systems that are about us as a country, but also men and male privilege and patriarchy.
Bo, do you want to take, somebody just posted up that, I'm sorry, but why is this not considered trafficking? These brides would qualify for T visas.
We're not saying that all the cases, we're not saying that there are not trafficking cases, but I think we know that when some people have been given or told that they were trafficking and then their cases were in fact did not, they could not qualify, or not, I shouldn't say qualify, all those conditions were not met for trafficking, then it doesn't help that victim, right? Because so we say, we support the survivors if they want to seek any legal remedies because that's very important. That's the most important thing. But also that many of these cases, the husbands don't benefit from them coming here. And then also many of the young brides come here and they came here, it might have been pressure or considered forced or something like that. But the State Department and the U.S. Embassy, does their due diligence. And so if they can, if they have gone through that process and qualified for a fiancé visa in order to come here, then it gets difficult to prove that they did not know what was happening, right? And so, the challenge is for a young woman to or the brides who come over to understand all of those things, I think is difficult. And the reason why trafficking alone is not does not define these relationships, because it is under the auspice of marriage that these situations are happening. We're not saying that there are not trafficking cases, because I am very sure that there are, but not all abusive international marriages are trafficking.
Yes, and the other thing that we hold true to, not just jumping into, pushing this into a mainstream narrative of labeling it trafficking, was that a lot of the people that we worked with in the past 10 years did not consider themselves being trafficked. Like, they did not consider themselves to be here for to be exploited for labor or exploited for sex. They actually believe that they're here as a family member, as a wife. And we have to respect that, because it wasn't just Hmong advocates who said, let's label it this, but the people who were going through it themselves were like, I'm not here as a sex trafficked person. I'm not here because he's exploiting my labor. Like, I'm here because I'm a wife. And what that does is that, whether we like it or not as advocates, what it does is the little protection that they have left in the community, as a wife, they still have a lot of protection and they still have a lot of say. As a trafficked victim for sex or labor, that's a very different, those are very different consequences. Those labels come with different consequences. And so, we were respectful of our community and understanding that though there are remedies within the trafficking definitions and work that we can use to help seek justice for the women and girls that we were working with, that we could not label them something that they didn't see themselves as. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of people. Go ahead, Bo.
Oh, I was just going to say, we just did, as I said, a briefing about that. So I would advise just taking a look at that too, to help kind of clarify why we don't call abusive international marriages trafficking.
Yeah, I mean, Katie, we understand that a lot of victims and survivors almost never self-identify, but we also understand that a lot of communities of color do not, not communities of color, a lot of our folks, it isn't so much that they don't understand and think that that they are being or maybe going to be used as victims. Okay. So, yeah, I'm not saying that isn't true, but I can tell you that we, working from victim-centered advocacy, just know that a lot of them do understand, and they do know, and they don't want to be identified as victims and survivors, that they would, many of them consider themselves wives and family, So I feel like definition and labeling does matter. And so it's not something that we just said, if it fits into trafficking, great. The other thing somebody asked also about, we are a U.S.-based movement, though we work globally. And then I think there's another one about discussion about intervention to empower women.
Yeah. There was an earlier question about whether we had any events coming up. I want to say that this is an active week for us across the country. So in different localities, there have been conversations happening, and we try to pair that with Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So there have been conversations happening in California, in Fresno, I think, already had one, and then there will be one in Sacramento tomorrow, one here that is focused on men, and then one in Wisconsin, and then D.C. or the East Coast, the D.C., Virginia, Maryland area already had theirs. So if you follow our Facebook page, you'll see the events posted.
Yes. And just to go back to, Katie, your clarification that you're looking at from an immigration standpoint, like Bo said, if it fits the definitions of trafficking and those are very specific definitions, then definitely I think that people should use that remedy to seek justice for Hmong women and girls. we are totally in support of any kind of remedy that would help our community. All we're saying is that we've come as Hmong women, as Hmong advocates, we are coming from a place of, what is most restorative, what is most transformational, what is most healing, what is justice look like for our communities, particularly women and girls and those most impacted. And what we've learned in the past 10 years is that and now I can say in many communities of color who are heavily criminalized, criminalization and the legal system is just not one route that many of our people have chosen to take. And as advocates, we do what women and those who come to us for services, what they want. And I can tell you that, in the 15 years that I've been a domestic violence advocate on the ground or gender justice advocate on the ground, the legal remedies are very few and far between. And in fact, the reason why we decided that we would do a grassroots community campaign to change hearts and minds and create new moral compass for our community is just that we understood that there are some remedies that people are not going to go and use. And if that's not going to happen, then we need to look at other alternative solutions that is more closely appropriate to our people. And we are in support of all victims and all, both the women here, both the women overseas. We've been instrumental in decreasing victim blaming. We've worked in the past 10 years. I can tell you that just in my city alone, we've gone from the first wives here blaming the women and girls overseas to understanding that it is the action of their husband or their partner. So we've done, and we've gotten man forward, Hmong men who will step up. We have now people talking about this issue. We have terminology. We have analysis. And so we've done a lot of work around this. And so as allies in this work, we hope that you all will continue to have conversations with us so that, an hour is not going to explain the work that we've done for 10 years, but hopefully this will give you a glimpse of why we come out this way and why we have labeled it the way that we have and termed it. Bo, did you have anything to say? Okay.
No.
So, okay, so we only have like a couple minutes left. And I guess there's a lot of Hmong folks on this call, but there's also a lot of allies on this call. What Chai was saying before, I don't know if Chai's back on, but one of the things that is very helpful for our allies to understand is that we hope that you all as lawyers, as immigration lawyers, as, social workers who are in this fight with us, we hope that you all take the lead, follow our lead in that we've been very strategic about how we've been talking about this issue, how we've been trying to present it to our community, and that it isn't something that is just coming out now. So we want you all to understand that it is in the best interest of our community. We are doing this work from a victim-centered place, which means that we value the safety of all those impacted, including our own lives. And so it's important for you all to also respect that, and that it isn't just something that we're trying to not name, or that we don't see the sexual violence in this, or that what strategies are we using, why it doesn't fit what you're trying to do, and that trust and believe that we are in this fight together, and that we've been doing a lot of social norm shift in our community, and things have gotten better. And so if you have any other detailed questions, or if you're working on a case and you need some help, like, as allies, we understand that you may not be the best one to maneuver all of the cultural nuances, so we're here to help you. The other piece for the Hmong folks who are on this call, we just want to thank you all for listening and really take everything back and share with people so that we can solve this issue within our community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll just close out to say that I think as as you can see, this issue is complex in that oftentimes the burden is on really the victims and survivors to navigate multiple systems. And I know that that everybody's goal is to serve the victim, but oftentimes we compartmentalize the problem so much that victims are not adequately served. And I think we would agree that this issue is not new, but among women victims and survivors and impacted families are not being well served because there is so much disconnect in services, and so it really takes a much more holistic kind of approach, and that is also why it makes a huge difference to have well-trained Hmong advocates who can help the victims and survivors navigate all the multiple systems. And then also we know that when a victim and survivor comes forward, every time they are asking for help. So whether they're telling, a young child or an adult child, because we have seen many adult children who are struggling with this come out in the, workplaces talking about the challenges with their parents and things like that. When impacted family members are asking for help, I think that a lot of people are just trying to figure out how to support them. And so now that you have a better grasp of kind of who is all impacted, I hope that you are able to help identify what could be done differently, and that for a victim and survivor, when they are sharing their stories, we have to take so much care because if they are out in public, it is not just exposure to additional, or continued abuse by abusers, but there is a lot of community risk as well because she will bear the burden of the blame and shame and isolation. And we try very hard to be supportive, but oftentimes, we are not able to do that. So I will just end with that and thank everybody for joining us today. Nancy, you can close us out.
Great. Well, it is 12:30, so I wanted to keep us on time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our webinar today and for what an engaging conversation for the Q&A session as well. As we close out, you'll see a link. I think you'll pop up a short evaluation of our webinar and just letting us know your thoughts and what you plan to do differently. Thank you to our three amazing presenters and to Chick for kicking us off. And yeah, please stay in touch. If you have additional questions, you can reply to email by email to me, and I can forward it to our presenters should you want to be in touch with them. And yeah, stay in touch and hope to see you on our future webinars. Thank you.